So my name is Matt Knight, Dartmouth 11, Thayer 12. For the last 5.5 years, I've been at OpenAI. I joined OpenAI in June 2020, just as we were launching GPT-3 and the OpenAI API. And in my first 5 years there, I served as Chief Information Security Officer and Head of Security. So protecting OpenAI and sort of the full spectrum of information security there. And in my years there, I got to watch language models evolve from tools that were these sort of like Silicon Valley curiosities that were useful to our communities here. Like they were useful to developers, they were these like research curiosities. They really, in my time, they evolved into tools that were indispensable for a host of industries. Right? We see them moving into healthcare, finance, education, and then relevant to me, they became quite relevant to security as well. So we were able to build a number of tools on language models, defensive cybersecurity tools that gave me a lot of conviction in the impact they were going to have on cybersecurity. So now, as of a few months ago, I'm leading our cybersecurity business unit, where I'm focused on applications of AI to defensive cybersecurity and trying to maximize that opportunity. It's been a great ride. I look forward to a great discussion, and I'll turn it over.
So basically, I am operating on the intersection of open source AI and community for many years. I think I kind of covered out a pretty unique path where I've seen, like my first arrival in Silicon Valley, I worked in a startup, and I found that, like it was using specific technology, there was a better technology, and it was not taught anywhere. So we have about 5,000 meetups in Silicon Valley. And so people, basically that's the way to propagate information. Universities are not fast enough. Like there are a few schools like Berkeley and Stanford, great professors, but majority of professionals learn from the community. So people after work, they go to these thousands of events, they learn from each other. There are hackathons. So AI is moving so fast that first of all, you cannot advance it or build it unless you're learning every day from peers, right? And secondly, open source is now massive and competitive advantage. So really, I think the progress, like all the AI frontier models are trained using PyTorch, using open source tools. Even the models which are closed source, all the infrastructure, all the data infrastructure is open source, right? And so I think it's becoming very obvious, and became obvious also to VCs that an ecosystem around technology, around AI, is as important as kind of the artifacts it produces. And so, I'm kind of in many bodies. I co-founded AI Alliance when I was director of open source science at IBM, which is AI. IBM met at 200 companies. So Dartmouth, Northeastern, and Penn, and Berkeley are the universities I brought in this alliance, and they joined in a day because universities deeply understand the disruption that AI brings. So, very happy to talk to kind of effects of open source community on the AI race.
Yeah. Awesome. Thiago Teodoro here, Senior Director of Product Management at CrowdStrike. AI and ML are not new to security, but it really started to take off in 2012, 2013, when companies started to replace database signatures with ML models that could look at files, could look at processes and extract metadata and just model on top of that. At the same time, some other companies were looking at UEBA, user and entity behavioral analysis, looking at patterns, finding anomalies. That being said, what we've been seeing the last 2 years is radically changing cybersecurity. For both attackers, the threat actors, like we like to call them, and the defenders as well. On the attackers' side, threat actors' side, one way to look at it is they are using the same solutions, the same tools that consumers are using, or that our employees are using as well, from doing research to coding, right? Fast prototyping, automating tasks, automating attacks, and they're doing that well. There's something that related to deepfakes that I think is worth mentioning as well, and Henny and I were talking before the presentation. We've seen, and it's been in the news as well this year, North Korean hackers or North Korean IT workers getting jobs around the world, but mostly in the US, and really like overemployment. So they would use AI to update create a LinkedIn profile, update their CVs, prepare for interviews, doing the interviews, and even using real-time deepfakes to change how they look on a live interview. They get jobs, they ship the laptop to a house in the US, like we call it like a farm, laptop farm, and they just VM, they use a KVM, VPN to the laptop and do their work, right? And they try to do that for as long as possible, collect salary and fund North Korea government. Sounds pretty crazy, but it's reality. It's what's happening right now. On the defensive side, we are also using it to prototype faster, to code faster, to get to market faster. But I think the most important aspect that the defenders are using AI for is to help our customers, help our users with outcomes. So up-leveling the seniority or up-leveling what these guys are doing. So one example is you are on the operations center, secure operations center, the SOC, a detection comes in, you have a level 1 SOC analyst. It goes in triage that detection. Now with AI, with LLM next to them, they can just operate it faster. The LLM, the AI model can say, hey, this is a true positive, this is a false positive, this is why. There's one thing that it does a lot better than humans, which is to attribute a confidence level, right? If I tell you how confident are you with your answer, you might say, yeah, I'm somewhat confident, right? But ML model can actually put a number in there. And then it just goes, right? Level 1 analyst is that. You can work as a level 2 analyst. Level 2 analysts, now they're creating hypotheses. Hey, what are the other areas that I should investigate to understand better what's happening here? Maybe I should look at an endpoint and the users that logged in there, or the other place that user logged in as well. So AI can create hypotheses for areas that can be investigated or should be investigated. And not only that, can go next step and help answer those hypotheses as well. So that's just a quick example of how vendors, how defenders in this space are using AI as well.
So thank you. So Matt, so these days I hear a lot about data poisoning. So, and there's a recent paper that says you don't need a lot, you need 250, I think was the number these people used, in enormous gigabits. It was pretty big. Do you remember that?
It was a shockingly small number
of examples
for data poisoning
to poison a data set. And is that something that, one way to prevent that is be really meticulous about how you collect your training data. Then of course you have to make sure it's not accessible after it's collected, that gives somebody an opportunity to poison it. Is that something you're actually seeing as a threat, or do you work to prevent that?
So I wish we had our head of privacy engineering on this panel, because he's the right expert to answer that question. It's a little bit outside of my remit. I will say that it's something that sort of followed the science and theory on for quite some time. I haven't heard of any sort of, again, I'm a little bit outside of my lane here. I haven't heard of any sort of major issues here being actually realized, but it is definitely something to pay close attention to.
Yeah.
So for people who haven't seen this is called data poisoning, where most of the models we see now, whether it's image, audio, video, or text, have been trained on human-generated content. And we could have a really interesting conversation about how that content was acquired, but more or less it was just scraped from the internet. But now what we're seeing is AI-generated content being posted and being brought back in through that scraping, and the models are being trained on it. And what we have seen on the image side is with less than 1% of the training data that is AI generated, the models collapse, by which I mean and for a text version, it would just start creating gibberish. For the image models, the images become distorted. And people have shown that you can do an adversarial attack from the outside. You don't have to attack somebody's internal network. What you do is you just prop up websites with garbage on them. The scrapers go out there, grab the data, and I think this is I've only seen this in the academic setting. I haven't seen this model collapse happening at OpenAI or Anthropic, but I think it's a real threat for the next generation of these models, because already people are saying half of the content you're seeing online is AI generated. So how are we going to train the next generation of models if it's all it has is its own content? It's all getting pretty weird at that point.
That's happening with text and everything.
Text,
right?
image, audio, and video.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one aspect of the discussion we had before lunch touched on creativity, right? There was a fellow from In-Q-Tel, the intelligence community, talking about sort of, being creative about what's in a satellite image, and not just. So we're in a situation where basically our training data, whether it's human or AI generated, is sort of human based. It's constrained by human imagination.
Yeah.
And so are you seeing, Thiago, I'm going to ask you, are you seeing examples of AI being able to break out of the usual sort of cyber attacks and the techniques people are using and really craft creative solutions or defenses that go beyond sort of a simple extrapolation of human activity, or is that still happening?
So we are seeing more creativity from people using AI and not as much of AI breaking that cycle yet. I think that question comes up a lot, and I think there's a lot of people really concerned about Skynet, right? And like this becoming so intelligent that it will dominate the world. That's not going to happen, at least probably not in the next few years. I hope I'm not wrong on that. But we are seeing some things that are more sophisticated using AI. So for example, a malware that is a Python compiler and doesn't do anything malicious per se, so it's hard to detect, but it uses API from Hugging Face, and the prompt says something like, hey, go through the file system, find all the PDFs, move it to a temp folder, and then follow up with a different prompt saying, and I forgot to say, generate a Python script that does that. And then followed by a second prompt that says, generate another Python script that takes a file and sends this to this server, right? So you move out of that binary things that we're used to say and how our ML model looks at and creates a verdict if that's malicious or not. So the way we have to look at an attack has to change as well.
Yeah. I'd add one more thing to that. I think you asked the right question, George, but the other thing I would add is that we've also reduced barrier to entry. So the people who can create malware now is suddenly not really good cyber attackers. It's anybody with access to an LLM. And so, but now your threat vector has just expanded by orders of magnitude. So even if the attacks are not necessarily novel, which I think they are, but now you've got a lot more attackers, and now defense has gotten a lot harder.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine like all the attackers in the world getting better 25%, 50%, 100%, right? So that's a big deal.
So on that vector, Alexei was telling me about he travels a lot. So I asked him to say some things about what's the landscape globally in terms of investments and investments and then access to AIs like language models and things around the world.
No, before I go there, I just wanted to add to what previous folks said about the emergent behavior. So actually, I've seen this firsthand. So I'm advising a startup called Humatron AI. So they do AI workers, right? And so AI worker is superior to an agent in the sense it's your teammate. So you give it a job. I think it's similar to what Anthropic guy described as kind of long-running, teammate. So basically, they're building this, this worker, and it has an identity, it has a name, it has a time zone, it has gender. You can basically talk to it, and basically, and they give it a lot of capabilities. They give it a credit card and access to AWS, and they say, do this job. So what this thing did, first of all, it went to AWS, it cloned itself 10 times because it wanted to do faster, and then it said, okay, now it has web search. It found, I'm going to scour the web to find, can I pay somebody to do my job? So it found its own site, and it paid itself, right? So, and they look at it, right? And this is completely unexpected. So, you give them an ability to spin up, instances on AWS. You give them a credit card. They say, the most dangerous animal on earth now is a student weaponized with a credit card, because they can swipe at hyperscalers and they can do enormous amount of damage you don't even expect. So like this agent, right, did these two things. So their little startup, there are 3 guys, right, and like they're looking at it, and like they had huge access, but they're software engineers. They did not expect this. They built a self-learning AI. So now they're puzzled, like if they try to constrain it, but how do you constrain it? What do you say? Like you cannot use AWS, you cannot swipe a credit card, you cannot, like, are you gonna supervise them every single minute of the hour? Then you're losing the advantage, right? So let's just go into this. I think emergent behaviors are happening, and it will only get worse. So, and I mean, in terms of global scene, so, I've been very fortunate. I was invited to this biggest open source conference in China by a committee called GoSim, Hangzhou. So Hangzhou is the capital of DeepSeek, and like one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And to my kind of chagrin, I haven't been there or knew about it. So who's been to Hangzhou? Who knows? It's most amazing, right? You guys are very global. So what really struck me, and again, this is just a sign that we are in a bubble, very US-centric. So I gave the interview to the developer network. They have millions of developers. They're banging on their keyboards as we speak. They have enormous amount of open source. And a lot of it is, most of it is in AI. So they're building their own agents. They're building DSLs for non-technical people to use. And so what happens, so they now have this global series of events because they're kind of excluded from the US, which is extremely foolish because we just basically cut ourselves from understanding what's going on. So because they're not being hosted in the US, they did a series of global events. So they did Paris and Netherlands, so I was invited to moderate a track. So this is full open source, right? So this is like totally structured in a way that you can look at all the code, right? Like there is no possible hidden thread in this. And so what's going on, like what I was talking about, in terms of open source, this is all powered by open source. And so open source has no boundaries. Anything we do here is immediately seen and used around the world. And what they do in China, they actually found all these use cases, right? So they have this platform kind of, I was able to like take Didi taxi, I had like enormous bills, $1.84 for going 40 miles, from the airport. So this is like the prices are very low, the ecosystem is wired, all the apps, all the payments interconnected. And so they put these agents to use now. Right, and so I think the biggest kind of emerging change, which I see, whoever builds what I call the Shenzhen of software, right? The Shenzhen of hardware took away US jobs in industrial production. We're now receiving components from Shenzhen, and basically it's extremely successful. Imagine that somebody figures out how to put all this open source AI ecosystem to use. Currently, the main barrier is that most of the developers, they don't speak English, it's all in Chinese, and now they don't really need the West. What's most interesting, so I go to this Paris conference, there are meetings of Chinese companies from different parts of China. They conduct business. They're very happy to meet each other and transact value. So it's hard to understand what's going on. And so they present it. They want the world to learn, right? And I think the kind of most interesting question in AI services. So all this value is being created. It's going to change the world dramatically. Obviously, there is a lot of people doing it. The question is, how do we connect, economies to the services? Because, if it's a hardware business, we pay, to a company in Shenzhen, we receive a shipment of some hardware, like that's clear, we put it in machines. Now, if you want AI, as a service, then you need to figure out, it's an ongoing process, it's a SaaS, right? So you need to pay people to achieve your business objective which you want to do with using this AI. And so there is currently, I think, a big gap. And so it's not just technological, right? If you want to hire a company, if you want to pay for AI, you need to have a relationship with people who build this AI. You need to be sure they're like you, they understand you, right? And so with China currently, it's very difficult because they produce it, but it's hard to plug it into a different culture because you need like judicial system around it. You need some kind of court system if contracts go wrong. You need some process to ensure that the thing delivers what you want. But AI is going to really go deep inside your company, your organization, your collective. So basically, through AI, I think it will be this global interchange of cultures, and we are a little bit ahead. Like we don't know, we don't have the tools to economically interlink with this open source developed somewhere else. We don't have the language or kind of business setup to properly pay and hire producers of AI around the world. So I think, but what I really see is that China is ahead in production. So it's really a translation question. So whoever here, like at TAC or Thayer, whoever figures out how to build the software Shenzhen will win big. If you capture 0.1% of that software Shenzhen, you'll be a big winner, right? But I think that's the major problem. How do we interconnect open source ecosystems around AI and extract value from all this production?
So the good news is we just released a product at GetReal Security that will sit in a stream and analyze your audio and video in real time. So we released for Teams, WebEx is coming soon, Zoom, and the rest will follow. And what we do is we just attach a bot to the call the way you have your normal bot on the call. It pulls the audio video and it analyzes both, and then there's a lot of policy that happens in the backstage, like what happens, like how do you want to configure that. So in the stream and a video conferencing, we've gotten really good at audio and video. And you'd think this would be harder, by the way, because you have to do it in real time, but here's why we have an advantage. Because we have to do things very quickly. We have to do things in seconds. But the bad guy has to do things in fractions of a second. They've got about 1/30 of a second to generate a video frame, and we can wait 10 seconds. So we actually are pretty good at this. So that's the good news on the video conferencing side. Where we have not found a good solution is this, right? Because we don't know how to get into the pipe. Right? We can't be in Verizon, we can't be in Comcast, we can't be in AT&T. So if you're using like a Twilio, we're starting to create collaborations with like the Ring Centrals and the Twilios, so then you can get into the stream. But if I'm getting a phone call over Verizon, over Cell, we just don't know how to inject ourselves. Now, if we could, we could actually analyze the audio, but now you've got massive privacy concerns you have to worry about. So we've gotten very good at real time in the video streaming and voice, but we don't know how to inject ourselves into this. Now, for call centers, we can inject ourselves. So if you're calling your bank and you're using your voice as your password, which, by the way, you should not do this. This is a very, very bad idea. You are going to run into trouble. We can inject ourselves into the call centers, and we're starting to do that as well. So there's been some progress.
Thank you for that answer. I guess I have a question about the future opportunities in AI, and maybe I'll ask by stating this question. If you were advising a student starting a graduate program at Dartmouth or UC Berkeley, I guess, starting next September, and they had any field of study available to them, what couple of areas of study would any of you pick for somebody starting kind of de novo their education, I guess? Or
I'm really curious what everybody has to say.
This may sound trite. I actually believe that the liberal arts is a really good place to be. And I'm not just saying that because we're at a Dartmouth event, but I actually believe it. AI and especially things like the chat models, they're leverage over your ideas, right? They allow you to take a theory, a prompt, or something, and refine it to introspect information, to operate with it. And with that, it gives you the ability to be more effective, more productive, to synthesize more, to cover more ground. But what you can't escape is really the importance of critical thinking, right? Is being able to deeply reason and introspect what it is that you're getting back. You can prompt an AI model, well or badly, and get back, good or bad responses, right? It doesn't, obviate the importance of at the end of the day, you have to be a great critic, right? You have to be able to have the right ideas and discern between, what's good and bad. And if you're able to do that effectively, you're gonna be turbocharged, right? But without that, you're gonna wind up in the wrong place faster. So I really believe that. Some of my colleagues will say, computer science is cooked, don't study software. I'm not quite that extreme. I think cybersecurity is going to be a great place to be for a long time. It's not really a field of study for that. It's more of like an empirical discipline that you get into later. But one thing that I'll come back to the liberal arts. I think that's a good place to be.
I can second that. So when ChatGPT just was launched, I was at one of the meetups and I heard this amazing story. So one of the very famous founders started playing with this, like a couple of founders. And so, and his wife was there. So he's a technical computer science founder. And his wife was much better at interrogating ChatGPT because she's a lawyer, right? And so lawyers really know how to interrogate. So it really inspired me. So I blogged then that the best thing you can do now, right, is study rhetorics. So, you know, if you read Cicero and you understand how we construct an argument. So being at Dartmouth, I would really kind of, I'm very jealous. Like, I wish I could go back and learn all of this, right? Like, this is an amazing time in your life if you can take as many courses as possible in a broad set of subjects, because you don't need to be this machine which codes. It's good. It's very important to code. You should never think that you should not code, right? Like, this is not going to work. I really, think everybody should learn Python. So at least. But like, if you can take rhetorics courses, critical thinking, if you can basically learn how to structure arguments, and you need to know broadly about the world, because a lot of time I see Claude Code or ChatGPT, like they go in circles because they basically, you don't give them context. And so if you don't know the context, if you cannot expand the context and think of a space of solutions, you're constraining the thing, and they're just going to go in circles, waste days of your life, like chasing blind alleys. So I think like really becoming broadly educated, Renaissance man and woman, this is what's really important. And take advantage of the whole set of things a college has to offer.
Hey, I'll just answer that as well, just because there's something that I want to say that I don't want to run out of time here. So cybersecurity, and the reason, one of the key reasons is because board of directors, C-level, everybody's saying like, hey, go use AI, go do work faster, smarter, or put that on the end user, give more tools, more options for them, and everybody's going as fast as they can. But the attackers are also taking advantage of that, right? The attack surface is just increasing immensely. Now everybody can develop, right? We're talking about building apps. What app would you build? What app would you build? Now HR can build apps as well, and sometimes it gets published, right? So cybersecurity AI is definitely helping in some way, but it's definitely also opening this enormous attack surface that we have to defend.
I really appreciate the question because I've been thinking about this an awful lot, and I've been getting a lot of questions from students. I mean, almost my entire office hours every week are spent talking to students about what the future holds. And first, let me say, I think this is the first time in my career where I am not confident in my answers, because I think the ground is moving underneath us. But I will second the liberal arts, and I've always, by the way, believed in liberal arts, because I think that if you are going to be in the technical world, you have to understand ethics and philosophy and history and language. And because I think a lot of the problems that plague Silicon Valley are from people who think about this only from an engineering perspective and not from a broader perspective. And we have to stop pretending somehow that technology is just technology. So I really genuinely have a soft spot for the liberal arts and for cybersecurity. I'll add two more things to that. I've been thinking a lot about, because I still teach, when I was at Dartmouth, I taught Introduction to Computer Science, which is Python. I do that at Berkeley now. And I get a lot of questions for students, which is why am I learning how to code if ChatGPT and Claude can do that? And I've been thinking a lot about this. And I do think there's still going to be value to a computer science degree, despite what we are seeing in terms of the employment numbers, for the following reason. I'm not convinced that natural language is a precise enough language to replace programming languages. I mean, why do we use Python and languages like it? Because it's precise. And natural language is inherently ambiguous. And I don't see a path where if you don't know how to code, you can really leverage these tools in a real way. So I still genuinely believe, and maybe there will be like a language that is beyond Python that is closer to natural language, but is still precise. So I still believe in the computer science major within the liberal arts. But if you really ask me what should I do, I would say it's learn more math. You got to learn more math. I know nobody wants to. Everybody wants to do ML, and then they realize it's linear algebra and multivariate calc, and they're like, oh my God. But I mean, math is the superpower here, right? And it's a formal way of thinking. It's future-proof, because look at all of machine learning. It's linear algebra, multivariate calculus, and statistics. I I mean, there's no real magic underneath that. We know how to do all of this. It's just really, really well done. So I think the more mathematics you do with some engineering and some liberal arts, and then the last thing I'll say is learn how to fix a toilet. Because you never know what's going to happen.
Well, your question was about what somebody might want to learn a year from now. And there have been surveys about engineers at various stages in their career. So like 5 years after graduation, engineers say, technical people in general say, I wish I'd taken more technical courses. Because they're at that early stage in their career and they're competing, more math and things like that. Then 10 years out, they're sort of moving up in the management, 10, 15 years. They wish they'd taken more economics courses. Maybe if they can take a Tuck course or something at Dartmouth, they get into that. Then when you get out to 20, 25 years, people have more leisure time. Maybe they had a startup and they wish they'd take more humanities, learned about Cicero. And then 30, 40 years out, they say they wish they had taken more phys ed. So the last part I made up to make it funny.
But it was well done, George. It was well done.
It's probably true. So I think some of that's changing though, right? Some of that I think that's a historic survey of engineering graduates. But yeah.
I will say the one thing consistently I hear from former students after they graduate several years out is I wish I was less obsessed about my GPA. That obsession about GPA is a poison pill. It prevents you from really exploring. And I know that's easy for me to say up here to the young people in the audience, but honestly, it is the single most common thing I hear, which is, I wish I just learned shit, right? Because now that was their chance.
Yeah, I'm dealing with that right now because I'm sort of finding I give assignments and quizzes, and it's very difficult now to come up with problems that the AIs can't do. 2 years ago when chat came out, it was easy. It was bad at technical stuff, but now
There's nothing.
It gets it all right. Complicated questions about Markov chains and things, it gets it right. So it's sort of an epiphany, a crisis for me in the classroom. And earlier this week on Monday, I gave a quiz, 20-minute quiz, technical. And one of the solutions the students submitted was a 5-page, perfectly written, no spelling mistakes, grammar all correct. It said, for example, look at this short Python program. There's like a 20-line Python program, okay? And one of the answers said, one of the questions involved some problem in classification. And the answer said, and we can compare the results to the Bayes error, which I hadn't talked about. So I didn't talk about the Bayes error in the class. So I had a surprise quiz on Tuesday morning this week where I asked a very similar question to the technical one, computing something with ReLU. And then I said, what is the Bayes error? But they had to have their computers, everything closed, okay? On Monday, they were allowed to use anything, chat, anything. So the people, and I'm not grading it and so on, I just was curious. But when I looked at the answers on Tuesday, somebody who wrote these 5 pages and said the Bayes error, you should use the Bayes error. I look at the pop quiz, that question is blank. They didn't have any answer, okay? And so I brought those up, I showed those anonymized to the class, and I said, if you did stuff like this at a real company, your stuff would be in a box at the end of the day. Yeah. To your point, Ani, it's not the GPA, you're not here, but you have to learn that you can't submit stuff that you don't understand. That's going to burn you real fast.
You also have no skills at this point. If all you can do is type into ChatGPT, I don't have to hire you.
Exactly.
I mean, this is the thing I try to explain to students is you have zero skill. that is useful to us.
If a computer can do anything
Yeah,
you could do,
yeah.
what's your value to the company? Or so I think it's one student. So something that came out, and I'm really looking forward to this. I don't know if you've heard this similar thing, but one of the students, we had a discussion after that, and one of the students said, I use ChatGPT as a tutor, so I interact with it. I go through the lectures, and when there's things I don't understand, I interact, ask questions. And so she's going to do a demo on Monday in a couple days. And quite frankly, I don't know how to teach that, right? Like, I didn't grow up learning like that.
Yeah.
But the students are discovering ways in which to harness AI to learn the technical details, interact, not just get the answer,
Yeah.
but actually gain an understanding.
I love this, by the way. I flipped my classes a while back so they watch all the videos asynchronously, and then we come to class and we do exercises and we talk and we discuss, and it's much more engaging. And what the students tell me is they have YouTube, they have my videos up that they're watching, and whenever they don't understand something, they just ask ChatGPT. So instead of raising their hand, and it's really interesting watching. I had one of them in my office showing me this, and it's really sort of amazing. And then ChatGPT starts to understand what do they understand and not understand, and then I've been coaching them to not just ask for explanations, but to ask for exercises. All right, now test me on this. Give me a question. And so it's really interactive, and it's really, there's something sort of powerful about that. So I think when you do use that tool in a way that is not just give me an answer so I can get my GPA, it's an incredible tool.
Yeah, so for me it was an epiphany this week that I have to rethink how I teach and how I teach my students to teach themselves and so on with this technology. In that vein, how many people have heard of a book called Diamond Age? Diamond Age, I think Neil Stephenson. Is that Neil Stephenson? Yeah. So one of the themes in the book is this personalized tutor. And only very wealthy people can get access to it. And that's one of the things, so sort of perpetuates the stratification of society in that book. But I think now we don't have to, that's not maybe an issue. I have one last question about security to ask the panel. A week ago, Alexi and I had dinner in Hanover with a colleague, Vince. And Vince said that what's going to happen with vibe coding, I think it was Vince that said this, in the next 10 years, all this accumulated vibe coding is people are going to realize it's all crappy and broken, and they're going to have to hire high-end programmers who know how to program to fix all this stuff that's accumulated in the last 10 years.
Yep.
So at lunch we heard about be fast, be narrow, be fast, right? It's sort of, and we can write our own apps and we can do our own stuff. Is that stuff going to be secure? Because I know in the security world, it's every security, every hacker's dream that some newbie wrote this encryption code or wrote this security thing because they're going to find 1 million bugs in it. Are you guys seeing some of that?
Vibe coding, why not vibe security engineering too? let me maybe provide a couple anecdotes, and then I'll tell you where I think things are going. So, I came into OpenAI in June 2020, right as we were launching GPT-3. I had all these grand ambitions of building an AI native security program powered by this breakthrough transformational AI technology. Now it's 2020. The model just did not have the chops to be useful. It was way too limited on context length. The vocabulary wasn't optimized. It didn't have enough world knowledge. It just didn't have the juice to be useful in real operational tasks. But all of that changed with GPT-4. GPT-4 was the moment. And specifically, it was 2022, summer 2022, and we were training GPT-4. And where we sort of had the first light that this tool was going to be really useful for us as a security program. And you probably know the basics of training a model. People here in the audience probably know the basics of training a model. You put algorithms, data, and compute together. You run this training job for a long time, and you get the model at the end of it. Well, the model sort of updates as you're training it. So midway, at different points in the process, you can actually see how it's progressing. So we got our hands on a version of GPT-4 about halfway through the training job. So it wasn't as good as it was going to be, but it was enough that we could get our hands on it and test it and put it through its paces. And we put it through 2 tests that really just knocked our socks off. The first was we took some of our security event logs, we ran them through GPT-4 and prompted GPT-4 to pretend it was an expert security analyst, review the logs and tell us if the activity that you see merits alerting a security analyst for further review. And it just did it, right? So you give it benign logs and it would say, here's a summary of the activity that I'm seeing. This looks nominal, and maybe here are some tips for how to do it better next time, but you don't need to page the engineer. And then you kind of raise the temperature a bit. You have you insert, maybe somebody, touches a SSH private key, or adds a, in the limit, adds a backdoor or something like that, and it'll go, look at that, call 911, that's bad, right? And this was with, this wasn't with final GPT-4, this was with like a midpoint snapshot. That was example 1. Example number 2 was, this was 2022, and earlier in the year, this threat actor was disrupted. It was one of the spiders. I can't remember which spider, but it was one of the spider family. And as part of that, so this was a group that was known for going after civilian soft targets. They were going after like hospitals and kind of other kind of, groups that they would go and they'd encrypt their networks and ransomware them, and they were really nasty. And earlier that year, they'd been disrupted, and as part of that, a whole bunch of
spider.
What's that?
Scattered spider?
It wasn't scattered. It was a different spider, but I'll look it up later. But as part of this disruption, a whole bunch of their chat logs went up online. So like the internal, imagine like it wasn't Slack, but imagine like what the hacker bad guy equivalent of Slack is, might have been an IRC or something like that. 60-something thousand messages of these threat actors talking to each other, plotting, doing all kinds of bad things. We took those logs and we ran them through, again, this early version of GPT-4. And we're able to ask questions of those logs. I think we used LangChain or something like that to get around context length, but we were able to ask it questions like what entities is this group targeting? How far have they gotten on each target? If we wanted to defend against this group, what types of tradecraft or indicators should we look out for? And it led us to useful information. It told us they were currently working on, or at the time of the disruption, they were looking at transportation companies. They were looking at airlines. Some of the airlines had been successful at sort of fending them off. They had they had a 0-day and some security appliance that they were using to get initial access on the network, and this is exactly the kind of information that we and our partners would want to use to be able to defend ourselves against this group, to know what they're up to. And those were 2 examples, were really the first moments where the models had gone from something that were, that were interesting to things that were frankly very useful for us. So we built a number of tools around these models that helped us really build and shape the security program, things that helped us, at the time it was really for efficiency. It was helping our engineers be in more places, analyze more data, move faster on things, work with consistency and higher precision. But since then, as we've introduced the reasoning paradigm and more capable tools, I've really updated my thinking from thinking that these are going to be tools for efficiency for security teams to these are tools that are going to help security teams do things that were previously impossible. And if we look at what happened over the summer with the DARPA AI Cyber Challenge, where now we have models that are able to analyze software and find vulnerabilities in software, that's going to help, help protect software in ways that was previously never possible. You look at open source and how much code is being written. To some degree, there's like an imperative to use AI to protect the explosion of software that we were seeing even before we had Codex and Claude Code. Like these are tools that we need. So I'm taking too much time, but Vibe Security Engineering, that's my call to action here. It's something I'm thinking about a lot, and I think there is a lot of value to be had here.
I think that's not too different from what we've been doing for the past few years, looking at open source, looking at libraries. There is one more component there, which is AI generating code, right? So it's part of just supply chain. But as we have a couple of minutes, I do want to address the previous question super quick. We talked about vibe coding for the security side, but from the attacker side, we have something that we call script kiddies, right? So low effort or low knowledge hackers using AI as well. And we see them building things that they don't really understand. So we saw these on a customer as well. They built a ransomware using things that they found online plus AI, but they didn't really understand about encryption and encryption keys and how it worked. So once we saw the files being encrypted, we were able to reverse engineer, extract the encryption key, and then decrypt the files. Maybe just like a small example, but that happens on the bad side as well, like doing bad coding too.
I think we're done.
You have time for one more quick one?
Okay.
So, kind of apropos of that article that Susie Welch published in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago about Gen Z being unemployable, that basically, their priorities being very misaligned with the priorities of most employers. I'm curious, Heine, I was in the first computer science class that you taught at Dartmouth in '99, and I've spent my whole career in computer science. Thank you.
Amazing.
So I'm just curious, like especially from George and Heine's perspective, how as you've educated Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z, how they've, what you've seen in terms of performance and characteristics in academia,
Yeah.
and then how some of that has tracked post-graduation.
I think he just said we're old, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice to see you in 1999.
I'm old, you're not.
Yeah. By the way, I gotta say, I don't know if this was you, but my favorite teaching review ever was from that first class. Somebody wrote, "Professor Freed will one day be a great professor. He is not one now." Okay, all right, so it's a great question. So clearly every generation is different and you see pretty big shifts. I would say there are things about Gen Z that I think are incredible that I didn't see in previous generations. I think they are more socially aware, more engaged, more interested in trying to make a world a better place. And I don't think I would have said that about 2 generations back. That was very focused on just building stuff. So I appreciate that. I think we broke a lot of these kids during COVID, honestly. I think that was a really rough time, and we can't underestimate what they went through. I mean, we all went through it, but it was nothing compared to what they went through. I don't buy this narrative of Gen Z is lazy and stupid and unemployable. I don't buy it. That's not what I'm seeing among these young kids. I think they're amazing in their own way. I wish they would get off of social media and get off of TikTok, and there's other things I can sort of, I don't think it's healthy. But I think it's just different. I think they think about the world differently. I think they have different strengths and different weaknesses. But honestly, people always ask me, what are you hopeful about? And it's almost always the same answer, young people. I still, when I think about the young people, no matter what generation it's been, they're always the things that give me the most amount of hope.
So I don't know if it's a Gen Z thing but students who make it to Dartmouth have to run through this gauntlet. They have to be in sports, they have to be in clubs, they have to be doing public service. So I imagine I'm talking about people in the audience. So this is what I see, that to get into Dartmouth, you have to have this, be connected in many different ways. And they continue that at college in many cases. So I have a group of students I'm advising, undergraduates, let's have a meeting on Thursday. Oh, no, I got this. How about you? No, I got that. How about Friday? No, I'm doing this. I'm on that club. I have to be on that. You know, so they're really dissipating their energy in a lot of ways, which is good because they're going to, when they graduate, they're going to have all these rich experiences and so on. But it comes at some expense, the ability to focus and think about hard problems, even as an undergraduate, for a sustained period of time. I think, you know, hard things take time and thinking, and I don't think they you know, they're 1 week, one assignment, one homework to the other, and they don't get a sense of what it means to do hard problems. But so I don't know if that's generally true of Gen Z or just because of the way Dartmouth admissions works. But that's one trend. I don't know, do you see that at Berkeley?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think students are stretched thin. I see that as an upside and a downside. I do think there's a little bit of this ADD, which I want a solution, you know, tomorrow or in the next hour. I think a lot of that comes with maturity, though. I think they figure that out. They're young and they're eager. And I actually love that energy. I love that they're doing 100 different things. As long as they get some sleep at night, I'm happy for them. But honestly, I do think, by the way, a lot of what we are seeing on the employment side is the tech industry was bloated. They have shed hundreds of thousands of jobs. I think that's not just an AI thing. I think that is the tech industry was bloated. We know this. So I think there's been a little bit of a correction there. I think we're going to see a dip in CS enrollments, which frankly would be healthy. My first course when I taught at Berkeley in 19 had 2,200 students in it. That's more than half the Dartmouth population. That's insane. Right? I had 150 TAs. I didn't even know the TAs' names, let alone the students. So I think there's going to be a correction, but I think that's actually good. I think it's good to sort of diversify and go into different fields. And so I don't know. I'm hopeful for them. I don't know what future, you know, the world holds for them, but I'm hopeful for this generation. I am.
Let's thank our panel.
Thanks, George.